Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're really looking forward to a valuable conversation around how you can motivate employees in a more authentic and meaningful way. And if we jump forward to the next slide, here's a few of our other events coming up outside of today's webinar, and we'd love to see you there. With regards to upcoming local conferences, starting in a few weeks, Lattice team will be at HR Texpo here in San Francisco. We welcome you to register and see them at their booth. And then the next week, Blueboard will actually be heading down south to the Cal HR conference, which is a 3-day event put on by our friends at Pyra. We're welcome to see you there. Please come visit us at our booth, as well as see myself actually speak during the conference. That'll be super exciting. And we are offering a promo code, which is Expo2262 to get $25 off their Expo Pass. Feel free to check it out. And then for anyone based on the East Coast, Blueboard's teaming up with CultureAmp and MBL partners to host a really awesome panel and meetup all around employee wellness and how that drives engagement at your company. Feel free to register via the link here. Otherwise, we'd love to stay in touch. At Blueboard, we just launched a host of new content and ebooks at blueboard.com/resources. And we welcome you to stay in touch with Lattice and join their Slack community at lattice.com/community. So here's a quick view of what we're going to be covering today. First up is why motivation actually matters and how it drives a really positive impact for your workforce. We'll then talk through the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivators and talk about how they really manifest in the workforce. We'll then move into strategies for increasing motivation and employee engagement. And lastly, have our guest speaker, Natalie, share some of the best practices that she's actually applied in her role at Civ Science. From there, we'll move into live Q&A. So on that point, a little bit of housekeeping. You're welcome to add any questions along the way into the Q&A box that you see on screen. As speakers will be reviewing those questions in order that they're received during the final section of the presentation. Otherwise, if you have any burning questions, please lean on the chat box. We'll cover those as they come in. Otherwise, the lines will be muted throughout the presentation. So along the way, please keep the conversation going on Twitter. If anything sparks your interest, we're highlighting #MotivationMakeover. Feel free to share it on Twitter, Facebook, etc. We'll be keeping the conversation going there. And for anyone planning to take advantage of the SHRM recertification credit offered, you will need to attend the presentation live. We'll be sharing the code at the end of the presentation. And unfortunately, it will not be featured in the recording, so please hang tight until the end to receive it. But if you do have to jump out early, not to worry, we will be recording the presentation and sharing that along with a written recap tomorrow morning. And lastly, we shared some really awesome resources for you to dig into after the event. Those were posted to the chat box right before we started. The first link is part of a new series of ebooks that we just released at Blueboard with some practical tips and customer stories for inspiring employee motivation through personalized recognition efforts, as well as a great article from Lattice that lists the 5 skills that every people manager should have. So let's quickly introduce our speakers. We go back one slide there. We're first happy to welcome Natalie Hudson. She's the, talent development lead at Civ Science. And for those of you who don't know Civ Science, they're a digital trust platform that protects business and customers from all vectors of fraud and abuse through live machine learning, a global trust network, automation technologies. Over 12,000 websites use Civ to fight fraud. Welcome, Natalie. Next up, we have Grant Maestas from Lattice. He's their head of customer success. And for those of you who don't know who Lattice is, they're a people management platform designed to engage your employees. With Lattice, it's easy to launch 360 reviews, share ongoing feedback and praise, facilitate one-on-ones, set up goal tracking across your company, and even run company engagement surveys. They're working with hundreds of customers, including brands we love like Glossier, Reddit, Cruise Automation, and New York Public Radio to help fuel their inter-office conversations and feedback. And lastly, I'm Morgan Chaney. I'll be your moderator today. I'm our head of marketing and a big part of our culture committee here at Blueboard. And for those unfamiliar with Blueboard and just joining us today for the first time, we're an experiential recognition and rewards platform for the modern workforce. We help companies like Lyft, Pinterest, Abbott Pharmaceuticals, and Google reward top employees with their choice of an experience instead of things like cash or gift card rewards. What's an experience exactly, you might ask? They range from local adventures like pottery classes or flying trapeze lessons to bucket list worthy travel, like taking the family to Disney, or even a couple's retreat to Iceland. So on that note, let's go ahead and get started. We'll start chatting through how a more motivated workforce can drive more positive business outcomes. But what does our workforce actually want? What are they motivated by? With 5 active generations in today's workforce, employees have increasingly different motivators. Here's a quick look at what's driving them, based on some recent research from Gallup. We'll first talk about Gen Z, our youngest generation, really entering the workforce just last year. Gen Z is really unique. They were raised in the Great Recession, so they have more competitive appetite than their millennial colleagues. They want to advance quickly. They want the tools and the plans in place to set themselves up for success, with the mindset of having a very swift climb up the corporate ladder. They're also our first generation with ubiquitous access to technology starting from birth. They live life at the speed of a Google search, so real-time feedback becomes a top motivator for them. But they also fall victim to the pressures of social media. They want to put something online that makes them look more adventurous, happier, or cooler than their peers. So when considering your employee reward strategy, remember that Gen Z is highly motivated by social currency, events that produce unique experiences that are ripe for posting on Instagram versus traditional benefits. We'll next talk through millennials. As you know, they'll make up over 50% of our workforce by 2020, so they're a very important target to consider for your engagement strategy. Millennials are motivated by a sense of purpose and connection to the company, because for millennials, it's not just their job, it's their life. They crave personal development with clear paths for progression, but instead of clean dictation on where they need to move next in their career, they prefer a much more collaborative environment and one-on-one coaching from their managers. But as we move to more mature generations, we see the need for work-life balance, job security, flexibility, and benefits begin to take precedence. As retirement age continues to extend, we see the mature generation staying with us longer. This group provides a unique opportunity to train the next generations below them, an important motivator as they leave their legacy. What do you see when you look around your office? Let's take a quick poll to understand which generational groups are represented in your workforce. As you'll see on the screen, we've got a quick poll running. So the first question is, which generational groups represent your current workforce? You can select all that apply. And then from there, which generational segment is the most prominent? So which one makes up the greatest share of your company when you think about headcount? On your personal one, right? All right, we'll give a few quick seconds, and it sounds like someone might have some audio on in the background, so if you don't mind muting, that would be great. Thank you. We're taking a quick roll at our poll results. I'll go ahead and share those on screen. So we're seeing that actually millennials are still making up the greatest percent of our workforce. Over 95% of you have millennials present right now, with kind of a second section filled by Gen X, which is pretty exciting. But when I think about which one's the most prominent, still millennials and Gen X, but we do see Gen Z rising and much more of the older segments like matures in silence and baby boomers starting to phase out, which is pretty cool. So thank you for sharing that. So what we see on screen is really that there is still a very diverse group of people in the workforce. So when we think about motivating these employee stakeholders, it's becoming very clear that one size will no longer fit all. So staying on the slide that we're still on, let's look at just, are people motivated or not in the workforce? And the sad reality is that most employees don't. In the same Gallup report that we just featured, featuring all of the generational groups, we find that just 20% of employees strongly agree that their performance is managed in a way that motivates them, to do outstanding work. This means that most are just doing average to mediocre work, in line with the same Gallup findings that we see with just 30% of our workforce actively engaged on a daily basis. From there, we see just 21% of employees strongly agree that they have performance metrics that are actually within their control. What this means is that their directives, goals, OKRs, and milestones are often dictated down from senior management without collaboration or a connection to the purpose, which, as we just shared, does not fare well with your millennial employees. And lastly, a mere 14% of employees strongly agree that the performance reviews they receive inspire them to improve. This means that your managers are probably not effectively engaging with your employees during those performance reviews and helping to focus them towards bigger goals or personal milestones. This makes the performance review cycle a waste of time for all parties involved. Most of us have pretty yucky feelings about performance review cycles to begin with. So if only 14% are inspiring improvement, then we need to definitely revisit the system and our communication plans overall. But what happens if employees actually were motivated? In businesses with highly motivated teams, we see a very direct correlation with two positive business indicators. Profitability increases by 21%, sales productivity by 20%, and output quality by 40%, according to research published by Harvard. And that's just the dollars and cents values for your board members and shareholders. Motivated employees are less likely to leave, which saves you recruiting costs from heavy turnover, and report lower rates of absenteeism, which comes in the form of abused vacation or sick days. And lastly, motivated employees are incredibly contagious, especially when they're within their immediate teams. When their peers see motivated teams that are excited to tackle a new project or arrive to work each day smiling and ready to go, this infectious energy contributes to a more positive company culture and elevates the motivated employees' surrounding network to perform at a higher playing field. If you click just once more on the slide, we'll see a great quote from Peter Martell, who's a senior talent development consultant at HBS. He writes that employees want to feel valued, and the best way to express that value is through investment in the individual. So reflecting on Peter's quote, how can we effectively motivate our employees at scale, given their varied internal motivators, interests, desires, and needs? Before we go further, we'll want to break down the two forms of motivation. They're called extrinsic and intrinsic. It's important to understand both of these. They each play a unique role in your motivation strategy, and depending on the initiative or task at hand, will be more or less valuable. The first form is extrinsic, or external motivators. This comes from outside factors affecting the employee, like money, fame, grades, and praise. When people are extrinsically motivated, they'll perform tasks that aren't necessarily enjoyable in favor of receiving a reward, or on the flip side, to avoid punishment. Examples of extrinsic motivation could include reading a book to prepare for a test, exercising to lose weight, or cleaning your home to prepare for your mother-in-law coming over. On the other hand, intrinsic motivation, or internal motivators, originate from within the individual and relate to their personal goals or their sense of purpose. When you're intrinsically motivated, you're operating from a desire to do something for its own sake. For example, your personal enjoyment of an activity or your desire to learn a skill. Some examples of intrinsic motivation include things like reading a book because you actually enjoy the storytelling, exercising because you want to relieve stress, or cleaning your home because it actually helps you feel organized. But it's important to understand how these actually manifest in the workforce. We talked about some personal examples, like the exact working out, for example, to lose weight. But what about motivating people in the workforce? Let's start with extrinsic motivators, which are often reward-based and either center around carrots, which might be something that you want to work for, or sticks, something that you want to avoid. In the workplace, extrinsic motivators can be encouraged through initiatives like recognition or praise, whether that comes from the employee's peers or their manager, but most effective when coming from senior leadership, because being seen by senior leadership triggers the fame effect. Additionally, the promise of career growth through raises, promotions, or increased responsibility can be a huge extrinsic motivator for employees. And lastly, employee rewards and incentives, especially ones that offer choice, that are unique and relevant and align with your company culture. And we'll talk about that in the next section in a little bit. Moving on to intrinsic motivators. The main driver here is linked to our younger generation's craving for a sense of purpose. The more you can keep mission and values top of mind and authentically woven into your employee experience, the more employees will feel connected and more internally driven to do right by the company. Learning and development, especially when customized to the employee's unique career path and goals, is another great way to inspire their ongoing performance. And lastly, creating a sense of autonomy and ownership of the employee's work. When something is clearly your own, you nurture it, you take care of it, and you feel pride when it's successful. These feelings are not the same when work is dictated down to you. And Grant will talk more about the art of autonomy and the relationships managers can craft with their employees to foster this in the next upcoming section. So let's quickly look at a scenario where this might come to life. And there's a few different motivators that we'll talk through. We'll kind of click through each one as they come on screen. But the reality is that a daily life of an employee or company is going to have a lot of different motivators at play. So here's a quick story that we can all probably align with. Let's say a front-end developer worked overtime to produce a code patch that saved the company from losing hundreds of customers due to an incredibly inconvenient bug. Some of us on the line are in the retail industry, so imagine this is one of those bugs that hits like the week before Black Friday, the ones that cause mass chaos throughout the company. But this specific front-end developer kind of came in and saved the day. So once that happened and the developer was recognized for their major accomplishment, it strengthened their sense of purpose within the organization, purpose being an intrinsic motivator. Their hard work felt truly seen and valued by leadership, which links to recognition, which is an extrinsic motivator. This encouraged them to continue working hard to deliver an exceptional customer experience, which was a core value of your company's. That links to purpose, which is an intrinsic motivator. This action strengthened their personal brand and reputation as a top developer and overall lifesaver across the wider company. This links to fame, which is an extrinsic motivator. And lastly, it put them on the radar of senior engineering leadership after they had this amazing bug save. So when the next promotion cycle rolls around, they'll be more top of mind. That activates a career growth extrinsic motivator. So before we go on, we're going to take another quick poll. We just chatted through the day of the life of a front-end engineer where they had a great save the day moment, and we had a lot of different motivators pop up on screen. So I'd love to ask you, when you hear, or just to learn more about what types of motivators you're actively focusing on fostering at your company. So I'm going to launch the poll really quickly. And jump back into our next one. All right. So the question is, of the types of motivators that you see on screen, which ones are you actively putting resources behind or actively promoting as part of your company culture? And you can check more than one. Lots of activity. This is great. So far, we're seeing a lot of people investing in praise and recognition, followed by career advancement and promotions. All right, I'm going to quickly end this and share the results so everybody can see. So our winner is praise and recognition. That's a big extrinsic motivator, and it looks like a lot of you are investing in that and making that a big part of your culture, which is awesome to see. Next is more around career advancement and promotions, followed by the intrinsic motivator, which is all about connecting to the company's mission, vision, and values, as well as learning and development opportunities. Thanks everyone for participating. Great, so moving on, I'm gonna go ahead and start to pass it over to Grant, who's gonna take us through a few great strategies for really increasing motivation through things that you can bring into even your daily activities or direct down to your managers through things like trainings and leadership opportunities. So feel free to take it away, Grant, and we'll move on to the next slide.
Thank you, Morgan. So before we dive in how to motivate people at work and how to get them engaged, let's chat about why engagement is important. Well, first off, engagement is directly linked to business outcomes. According to a 2016 Hay Group study, engaged business units achieve 2.5 times the revenue versus competitors with low engagement. There's a lot to unpack there, but at a high level, happier employees lead to more productive employees. Engagement is also essential for decreased turnover. Companies with highly engaged employees show 59% decreased turnover, and that's a big stat when you consider how time-consuming and expensive it is to replace an employee. So if you can ramp up engagement and retain your current talent, it can have a big impact on your company's bottom line. Lastly, these numbers are a great case for getting executive buy-in for engagement initiatives. Knowing that motivated employees are going to drive your bottom line is the best way to convince your boss to invest in things like manager trainings, offsites, and engagement tools. So how do we get there? The most effective way to engage people is through their manager. We've all heard the common phrase, people leave managers, not jobs. And although it's cliche, it's true. Your managers are really on the front lines of engagement, and it's through everyday interactions like meetings, emails, one-on-ones that they form an employee's perception of work. A good way to think about managers is as coaches, not bosses. Coaches are focused on finding each player's individual strengths and then bringing them together as a group to achieve a goal. Coaches also identify potential roadblocks to clear them for success, but also hold teams accountable for failures. The worst coaches are the ones who try to be the best player at every position. When I look back at my best managers, I think of the managers that helped me build my confidence by allowing me to focus on projects that showed off my strengths, while challenging me with projects that forced me to learn and adapt to my areas of development. Looking back at my experience specifically, one of my biggest weaknesses early on was process orientation. A really exciting and terrifying opportunity came around, and my manager volunteered for me to take the lead on the project. It was stressful at times, and I felt like a fish out of water, but my manager set up weekly check-ins and was there to answer questions and provide me with feedback. That was a huge barrier for me, and allowing me to take on a project that was completely process-oriented, increased my skill set significantly, and really set me up to take on future projects that were similar. So let's dive into how managers can motivate employees and keep them engaged. To begin, first they can start by connecting work to a sense of purpose. And there are kind of 3 clear ways to do that. Number 1 is establish clear company goals. These goals should be very simple and directional. I think a good litmus test here is that a manager should be able to go up to an employee and ask what at least one company goal is. If they don't know the answer, your goals may either be not advertised well or not clear enough for employees. When people have a better sense of true north, they will accomplish much more. Number 2, when it comes to establishing purpose, it's also important to show how an employee's work affects the company's product. An example here would be engineers. They're rarely customer-facing, but work on projects that your customers use every day. So if your customer support manager, for example, gets positive feedback about a feature request that was changed for a customer, make sure that's shared with the engineer so they know their contributions are directly affecting the end result. Again, it's about showing where things are in the bigger picture. And lastly, as I mentioned before, it's really important for managers to know their employees' personal goals. If you know your employees want to go, you can develop their individual skills and fulfill that sense of intrinsic motivation. Employees aren't always going to be able to work on exactly what they'd like to work on, but pairing them with specific interests will increase their performance. So setting clears is a big driver for motivation. These are some tips for goal setting that will keep employees engaged in the goal setting process. First, your employees should all own at least one goal by themselves. This will give people a direct sense of ownership that they'll consistently come back to, and they'll take pride in moving forward. It plays on the intrinsic sense of motivation to know that if you win this, it's on you, but if you fail, it's also on you. Another important aspect of goal setting is laying out the milestones you need to achieve those goals. For example, think about the difference between the goal, increase blog traffic versus write 4 articles per month on 5 different subjects. The first goal doesn't inform my work in any real way, while the second goal gives a clear picture of what needs to get done to achieve my goal. As mentioned before, when we talked about purpose, it's really important to link employee goals to company goals. It has the tangible effect of getting everyone in the row in the same direction. Think about a boat with people rowing in unison versus one where the rowers are sporadic and unaligned, which will have a multiplier effect on your company output. And make sure to involve your employees in the goal setting process. In fact, employees managed to involve them in goal setting are 3 times more likely to be engaged. Employee input on goals is really important for motivation because it makes employees more accountable and connected to their own results. On my team, goal setting is more of a conversation. I ask each of my team members to set 2 business goals and 1 developmental goal, so we both agree upon what is driving the business and what is driving them developmentally. It's more of an agreement for what success looks like rather than a rigid standard for success. Another super important factor for motivation is giving your employees autonomy. It's a really delicate balance, and you need to know when to step in and when to be hands-off. Nothing screams, "I don't trust you," like the manager who checks in about a task on the hour, every hour. If it's a task an employee can handle, let them handle it. If they need help, offer guidance, don't micromanage. Learning how to let your employees be autonomous is also an important skill for managers because it helps boost their productivity. Managers can allow their team to take on projects that would normally fall on their desk. It shows confidence in employees while freeing up managers' time. And let's actually dive into what autonomy is and what autonomy isn't. Because as I said, being hands-off is good, but managers don't want to be so hands-off where they aren't motivating their team. So autonomy is the ability to control the method to achieve results, but is not complete lack of structure. You can think about work methods as an example here. An employee can have the autonomy to decide what tools they're using to work on for a project. They decide that the hours they decide to work on it, but managers should still have established parameters for what success on that project looks like. How they get there is more up to the employee. Autonomy is giving employees the power to make their own decisions, but autonomy is not having employees work by themselves in silos. An example here, a sign of a good manager is that it's not about your output, but really the team's output. As I mentioned earlier, the best managers are the ones who understand that they are a strategic coach and not an actual player. Managers are players on their own coaches' teams. And lastly, autonomy is the sense that you are trusted and supported by your manager. It does not mean that your manager is completely absent from your project. Even when an employee is autonomous, they still need to be able to check in with their manager through methods like one-on-one or informally over Slack. They shouldn't feel like they're completely on their own, and they have a support team and their manager if needed. I thought this quote about autonomy was really fitting here. Effective managers establish themselves as resources, making sure to check in on employees while never seeming to check up on them. This quote is actually by Stephen Kramer, and essentially autonomy is a delicate balance. And as a manager, it's important to know how your team is doing without being overbearing. A great way to strike this balance as a manager would be to have more frequent one-on-one conversations. These are great to check in on how a project is moving along and how employees feel on a weekly basis. The emphasis here should be on progress, not results, which will give you key indicators on where employees need help and where they're succeeding on their own. The last factor that's critical for motivating employees is giving praise. It's a simple concept, but when employees feel recognized, it can drive both engagement and performance. Here are some of our best examples or practices for giving praise. One is to be specific. Instead of saying great job on that project, which is general and vague and doesn't really explain the behavior you want repeated, you have to point out exactly what and how the employee achieved it and also why it's important. A better way to put that same feedback would be, great job in organizing the staff around our all hands. Your detailed overview is perfect, and ensuring we do it at 5-minute sync before made it seamless. We couldn't have done it without you. Also, celebrate wins in all shapes and sizes. When giving praise, don't just focus on accomplishing end goals. You also want to celebrate the small wins and milestones. These could be ways that you've seen the person improve personally or small things that they've done for the entire team. And lastly, give praise across teams. Don't limit praise to just the 4 or 5 people you work with. Recognize wins on other teams that you admire or that helped out you. Finally, I'll wrap this up by saying it's important to share praise publicly and to connect praise to values. This will be a short and shameless plug for Lattice here, because this is our praise function that's integrated with Slack. But rather than giving praise to a person directly, it's awesome when wins can be seen by the entire company. You'll see Jacob here at Lattice was giving kudos to Kyle for presentation he did on SDR strategy, and he actually shared it with the entire company. We all saw it, and when Jacob shared with the whole company, became tuned into the work Kyle was working on. Sharing wins publicly connects the company and makes employees feel recognized outside their team. It's also important to connect praise with your company values because it drives home the sense of purpose that I previously mentioned. You'll see this values listed in the red rectangle. The specific praise was connected to our values of growth and effort, and it's great to be able to see that connection because when it becomes time for Kyle's performance review, his manager will know how Kyle contributed to what our company believes in. Bottom line on praise, we all like feeling recognized. Make praise a habit, and it will help motivate your employees. So that's it for motivating employees to keep them engaged. I'm now going to turn it back to Morgan, who will talk about using rewards as a tool for motivation.
All right, there we go. Thank you so much, Grant. I'm really excited to talk about recognition because it's such a key piece of your motivation strategy and something that we obviously spend a lot of time on thinking about at Blueboard. It can be activated daily and even verbally in a minute, but we want to talk about now the situations that really are deserving of a paired reward to deliver on that element of extrinsic motivation that we talked about before. Rewards and incentives are a great complement to your extrinsic motivation strategy, but because they're a hard cost, I did want to spend some time arming you with a few characteristics of a great rewards program to ensure that you're investing wisely. So the first characteristic we'll talk about is the notion of rewarding in real time. Some reward platforms that you might have shopped around with before encourage points that are usually given in small increments. These can often pile up, sometimes even months or years at a time before reaching a significant value. Sometimes it's not even redeemed until the employee is thinking about leaving your company and closing up shop. And by the time they are redeemed, like I said, sometimes even months or years later, the employee forgets what they actually did to deserve them. But rewards in real time clearly link the behaviors demonstrated with the reward in hand, encouraging those employees to repeat actions and behaviors in the very near future. Next, recognition should be personalized. Raise your hand if you might be victim to a program now that's full of outdated rewards, even thinking about big milestones like a 10-year anniversary, for example. Some of you might be the great recipient of things like a mahogany desk clock or a state-of-the-art vacuum cleaner, which are a little bit deflating after so much hard work and dedication to your company, as you can imagine. So when we think about personalization, rewards should be relevant, they should be modern, and they should offer the element of choice. This helps take the pressure off managers as well when thinking about what to choose for all of their employees. Some of us might have teams of even 20 or 30 people. So as much as you want to, it's really hard to get to know everybody on a personal level and give them something that's truly amazing. So why not let them pick for themselves, something that's most meaningful to them that you might not have even understood was a hobby or passion of theirs. And lastly, rewards should be supported. They should initiate from senior leadership, and it's our job as HR leaders to really get them involved. This can come in the form of things like having leadership hand out rewards individually to employees when they're of really significant value. Maybe things like those employees of the month or the quarter or those that are achieving high tenure. And also taking time during public forums. So things like town halls or company-wide meetings or offsites to announce on screen some of the more recent reward recipients that are happening through the company, especially like I mentioned, those of significant value, so that everybody can really have visibility into who is a top performer at the company. We think about the visibility piece as we reflect back on the example I shared with the engineer. There were two things that really stood out as extrinsic motivators. One was related to the fame piece. So whenever she was going above and beyond, really being seen by senior leadership, and also the opportunity for that visibility to link to promotions. So as you're top of mind on leadership's radar, it's really great for employees to have that additional leg up during promotion cycles. So many reasons to get leadership involved. Two of those are just the first that we're thinking of. And then the next piece, of course, on top of that is the fact that they're authentically woven into your culture. So when it stems from leadership and stems from the top, that means they're not just a reflection of your culture, but they're actually additive to it. And leadership is showing that they truly do see and value their employees and that they're a big piece of the culture. So this helps us to create a culture of recognition and genuine appreciation for each other's great work. It means that employees are genuinely excited to see the value that their teammates are bringing to the table, and they want to take that moment to celebrate them when it's a big part of your culture. So moving on, what does it actually look like to have real-time, personalized, and authentic rewards platforms? For most of us who are familiar with Blueboard, it looks like a lot of what we're offering here. So Grant had his moment for the shameless plug, and I'll take mine here on this slide. So quickly, what Blueboard is, again, we offer the ability for companies and managers to reward top employees with their choice of an experience. So when we think about real-time being something really important to consider for your rewards platform, we let you send rewards in under 30 seconds, and we have the ability to link that effort to a company value or other achievement that the employee demonstrated. When we think about personalization, the great thing with Blueboard is that employees actually get to choose from a catalog of experiences that are hand-curated by an in-house team of experienced curators. They're updated regularly based on what's on trend, and we also receive feedback from every rewarded employee that we take into mind when curating the catalog further. And lastly, they get to work with a concierge rep one-on-one. So we think about personalization, it's not just their choice, but it's also further customizing personal requests to make sure that they feel like a total rock star and that the weight is lifted off their shoulders with regards to logistics. And then thinking about support and authenticity to your culture, what we love about experiences is that they produce amazing recognition stories like those that you're seeing on screen. Families going to Hamilton together, challenging their comfort zones by doing things like a whitewater rafting trip, relaxing and indulging, for example, at a sunset wine cruise, or having dinner with the family, trying hot air ballooning. All of those things are great for building culture and can be easily shared by leadership during forums like town halls or displayed publicly through your walls. And this helps to show that the team truly does celebrate and value hard work, and that they're seen by management, not something that's just hidden, to themselves or with their immediate team, that everybody at the whole company is truly celebrating and value them. So this helps to build a culture that's truly centered around authentic appreciation. So going on from there, I'm going to leave that on Blueboard, and we're excited to introduce Natalie Hudson, like I mentioned earlier, who's going to be sharing real-life examples of how she motivates her team at SIF Science. Take it away, Natalie.
Thank you, Morgan. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share with all of you some of the ways that we've put these theories and ideas around employee motivation into practice at SIF Science. And so I'm going to talk about it from 3 levels, starting with our company mission and our goals. And then I'll talk a little bit more about our structures and processes at the organization, and then focusing on the individual level. And so we are a technology company, and we are based in San Francisco and have an office in Seattle of about 200 employees and are growing. So with a tech company, it is a very tough competition out there for talent. And we are small but mighty, but we are having to compete against the same bigger and more established companies for the same talent. So our mission to build the digital trust platform of the internet is really what initially attracts a lot of people to SIF Science. So we want to make sure that after people join and get into the day-to-day work and their new routines, and maybe the honeymoon phase wears off a bit, that they're not losing sight and that spark of what initially excited them and the potential for impact into what we are are trying to accomplish as an organization. So we do that in two pretty clear ways. One you'll see on the slide here is through values branding and having visual indicators around our office spaces to keep our mission of trust, our internal company values, and even our company goals that we set. We give catchy names, as Grant was talking about, to keep it simple and something people can remember. We even create visuals and keep those around the office. So as people are going in meetings, walking around, having lunch, taking a break, they are being constantly reminded as to what SIFT is about and what their purpose is here. But obviously that alone isn't going to be enough. It's also, as Ben mentioned earlier in today's webinar, how are you making sure that employees are connecting that day-to-day work with the company goals and filling up into the organization's larger mission? So at SIFT Science, we do this in a couple of ways in some large forums, such as our monthly all hands. When we were a little bit smaller, we actually did these weekly, but the all hands are a really crucial time for each function to talk about the state of their goals, what are the things that people are working on, gives other people from other teams to ask questions, and people can start to see and hear about the company's performance and purpose and connecting that work. We also do an annual company offsite, and that gives people an even deeper opportunity to really look at what is the team that they're on doing, how is it playing into the company goals, what's going to fit to take the company to the next level depending on the stage that we're at. And the other piece that we do is OKRs, objectives and key results. Some of you may use those at your companies, but we found that a really effective way for employees to have the projects and works clearly drawn to a company goal, and our OKRs are shared publicly and set up in such a way that they're organized based on the company goals. So nothing on there is just a nice to have. So moving on to the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about the investment of professional development and growth. So this is a very common way employees will talk about motivation. They want to feel like they are continuously growing and learning. The mission certainly attracts people to SIFT, but also a quickly changing environment. And a lot of the new hires I talk to will say, well, you know, my last job, there were a lot of great things about it, but I felt like I just kind of hit a ceiling and I didn't really have more to learn in my role. And so we saw that very clear business case. Grant shared some great data points about how these things aren't just a feel-good, nice to have, but really have a direct correlation to the business outcomes. So SIFT invested in a talent development function a lot earlier than a lot of our peers because we took this very seriously and wanted to think about employee engagement and motivation as a big part of that. So talent development really focuses on providing a mixture of just-in-time resources and learning opportunities, group learning environments, whether that's an internal workshop, bringing in external experts, and even providing one-on-one coaching for employees and also for our managers, since that's such an important relationship. Another way that we think about investing in our employees' development and growth is through these unique experiences. This is a little bit of what Morgan has talked about, of what Blueboard does. We are a smaller company, so you know, we all have our budgets and limits. So we knew pretty early on that for our top performers, especially when we don't have a budget, that we can just give people all the bonuses and raises that we want, that we needed to get really creative to think about how can we show someone that we really care about them as a person and valuing what they're doing and giving them something special in return. So that can be, you know, something like a special dinner with the CEO or some of our leaders, or if they have connections and their personal networks that's of interest to that person, investing in some other more of that learning one-on-one learning opportunities and resources. So that's another way that we think about how are we acknowledging, recognizing, and making those employees feel like they're being invested in. And the final point about development and growth is getting clear on what that means in your organization. So for us at SIFT, we wanted to be really clear on our perspective that it's not just about promotion, it's not just about raises and bonuses, but that there are other signals that you can get from the company and from your manager to know that you are learning, you are growing, we're investing in you, and we care about developing you here at SIF Science. And so we have communicated this in a couple of different ways. You know, nothing beats the manager and direct report one-on-one meeting and conversation. So making sure managers have a clear understanding of this and share that perspective. But also then when we're bringing on new folks for our onboarding, we actually created just a 90-second fun video talking about what talent development means at SIF Science. And part of that is for employees to drive and own their career path, but you don't do it alone, right? It's in partnership. So that's where we transition to thinking about the relationship between managers. So this will be the last point I talk about in the next slide. Our manager and Grant so wonderfully put it, they are to be excellent coaches, right? That is when a really effective manager thinks about the individuals on their team, leverages their unique strengths, and can push for the best out of them and help them grow. So to make sure that our managers have the right knowledge and skills and tools, we do regular manager roundtables, bringing managers from all types of experience and functions together to talk about a specific topic. So we did one focusing on motivating your employees, since it's such an important one. And this really gave them a wonderful opportunity to hear what works on different teams, what managers maybe have experienced themselves from other managers at previous companies. They can brainstorm ideas and really leverage the power of the group and work through it together, because this can be really challenging for managers. It can be a really lonely position. So we want to give them that support. And the other piece that we focused in this roundtable talking about motivation was the concept of rock stars and superstars. So this comes from Kim Scott's book, Radical Candor. Highly recommend it if you have not read it. It gives some excellent advice about being a wonderful manager, but it is not exclusive just to managers. And she spends an entire chapter talking about the importance of understanding what motivates each employee. And the purpose that I wanted to call out about this rock stars and superstars framework is because as a manager, it's important that they understand and appreciate that each person might have different growth trajectories, and that gets at different intrinsic motivations. So you might have someone who is looking to have some very quick, steep growth trajectory. They want those big projects, new challenges, so they can keep moving up in their career. And someone else, though, might want to be more of the internal expert on something. And there's different ways you can challenge that person, so just making sure that they're not applying the same assumptions and their own preferred framework to all of their employees. I think especially in our environment at SIFT, we have a lot of those superstars, right? Everyone here is so talented and brilliant and always looking for a challenge. But as the company grows, as teams change, as we bring in different people so that we're making sure we are a diverse and inclusive type of organization, managers need to think about their employees and not what they prefer themselves. And then the last point that was really important for our managers is actually giving them a conversation map, essentially, to have these developmental conversations with their employees. And this is something that is part of the review process, but also just part of the day-to-day experience here in our culture of continuous improvement. So on this last slide, I'll show you an example of some of these coaching questions that we provided with our managers. And this is a great tool if you, someone on your team, or even a friend of yours at work is unsure about, well, I don't really know what motivates me. For some people, that's a really tough question to answer. And if you really want to get at some of those intrinsic motivations we're talking about, it takes time and reflection to dig a little deeper. And so this is a 5-question framework that keeps it really simple. And again, a great coach, they're not coming with the answers, but they're asking the powerful questions so that the individual is surfacing the answers for themselves. So this is asking someone to describe a meaningful accomplishment and in their career, but it really could be any avenue of their life. If they have other types of projects outside of work, volunteer, but something that is meaningful to them, meaning it's not what they think their manager wants to hear or what other people would say is a meaningful accomplishment, but it needs to be really personal. And so asking them, what is that experience that you're most proud of? What was the challenge? To have them talk about the outcome, also getting specific about what skills and behavioral qualities did they use. And these things might be hard for them to come up with because a lot of times people's strengths will be natural to them and they don't see it as a strength. So helping to draw those out from the individuals can be really important. And then also, what was enjoyable about that experience then? Why is it meaningful? Why does it matter? Why does it stand out in that person's mind? And if you do this over a few different of those accomplishments and scenarios, they can start to see, and you can help them see maybe some patterns and some common threads, that might be linked to a deeper motivation around some sort of social contribution or influencing other people, the type of impact that they're having, or certain skill sets that they get to use. And then the next step, even further to use this, is not just knowing that, but then as a manager, how can you help them think about developmental opportunities, leveraging these motivators and these skills and talents that will link to the goals and needs of your business? So hopefully this is something that has been helpful and some little tips you can take back to your organizations today. And I will now pass it back to Morgan, and she will do a little wrap up before we jump into Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalie. I love those, especially the powerful questions. I think it's so great to have those real life things that you can take back into the workforce. So everyone on the webinar, you'll have to keep in touch with us as you put some of those into practice and see some of the results come through and building more strong bonds between your managers and their employees. So just to wrap us up, we're going to move into Q&A after this. So I posted a note into the chat, but feel free to get your questions rolling. We'll have those served up right after this slide. But our first takeaway as we think about wrapping up the day is that, as Grant shared earlier, managers are really key to winning an employee motivation, and we want them to become coaches, not bosses. We saw that being especially important with millennial employees as well. They want that one-on-one collaboration. They don't want to be directed. They want that coach, not the boss. The second learning is that managers should focus on checking in versus checking up. And that ties back to the motivator around autonomy, which really helps people feel like they're owning their own impact and charting their own course with their career development. Next up is the idea around recognition and praise that should be personalized, authentic, and delivered in real time. We talked about, especially with real time, how important it is to connect that behavior or action immediately to the recognition moment, so that employees understand what good behavior looks like and that they can continue producing those behaviors again in the very near future. Next, we'll look at different ways that you can inspire growth opportunities because, as Natalie mentioned, not all of us have the budget or the ability to hand out raises and promotions constantly. So it's time to get creative with other ways that people can have those growth opportunities. So things like lateral moves, potentially moving into a new role with the same seniority but trying out a new team, or even having increased access to responsibility. So as an employee might, in some of those questions that you ask them during a one-on-one or during a performance review, raise their hand to maybe be part of a new project or to help out maybe your boss's boss, for example, with some slides for a presentation or maybe pulling some research. Those are really great ways to help them flex new skill sets and contribute to a more broader purpose for the company. And then lastly, empowering and training managers to ask those really powerful coaching questions to help motivate them. The questions like Natalie posed are a great way for employees and managers to just spend some time breaking down the barriers and really learning more about each other. And from there, based on those questions, it's a really great tool for managers to then work on development plans along with the employee to make sure that everybody's aligned and in the right direction for career growth. Great, so we're gonna go ahead and move into Q&A. The lines are open with regards to accepting written questions, so we'll let those populate for a little bit. And just a final kind of reminder that yes, we will be sharing the presentation afterwards. Tomorrow morning, we'll actually have the video recording and a recap with the slides up on our blog. We'll be sharing that out with everybody who registered, whether or not you were able to attend. And while people are adding questions, we actually had a few great ones that came through. A lot of you might remember that I had emailed out after you registered, just asking what you were hoping to get from the content. We had quite a few people write back, so I wanted to share some of those top questions first, just to kick us off. The first that we'll cover came in from Susanna, who is with Macadet Health. She asked that her company, or shared that her company has some issues with more of the junior level employees and their attendance rates. A lot of them are coming to work late or leaving early. They're taking a lot of breaks. So she'd love to learn some motivation tips to really help them stay focused and really be mindful of timeliness and attention to their work. So Grant had actually reviewed this before and had a couple recommendations. So I'll let Grant share his thoughts on that.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I'd say a couple kind of quick recommendations. The first is I would recommend that managers actually set team meetings early in the week. Obviously, this sets kind of a good pattern and a good habit, for the week. So by kind of setting that precedent early on that, hey guys, we have our team meetings at 8:30 on Monday. It's a really good way to kind of drive accountability and make sure that employees are really kind of in the mindset. The second, and this might feel a little bit rulesy, but I know Lattice, we're a growing kind of startup, and something that we just instituted that actually was pretty well received is we actually created an employee handbook. So it feels very rulesy, but again, it outlines clear expectations and guidelines. And I think it's important for employees to really kind of understand what you're asking from them, because there's really kind of no gray area. So I found that to be an effective way to kind of clearly outline rules and expectations as well.
Great, thank you, Grant. The next question comes from Brittany with Last Line. This is a question about flexible working environments, which is probably pretty top of mind for a lot of us. Brittany is struggling because she wants to create flexible work situations, but she also needs to motivate people to actually want to come in more often. Sometimes we create that flexible work environment saying, take care of yourself, do what's best for your own schedule, but then it ends up being that people choose to work from home, or maybe have an alternate schedule more so than we initially imagined. So she wants a little bit more guidance on how she can motivate them, either to up attendance or other ideas along those lines, activity opportunities. So Natalie had a few ideas for her, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Natalie.
Yeah, so we are pretty flexible at SIFT as well, but actually find that a lot of employees do still come to the office pretty regularly. And I think, it's part of what's been ingrained in our culture, but certain things I notice that really get people are, we do these fireside chats during lunchtime, and usually the CEO or another leader is hosting those. And so it's just a really interesting opportunity to hear from the face or, one of our founders of the company, have a really fascinating conversation with, one of their mentors or just an interesting guest of someone who's a friend of theirs. We had someone from who's on the board of BART come, and so many of us take BART to work here in San Francisco or public transportation. So there was a personal interest in that. So finding, again, those sort of creative, personal pieces that bring people together, that's a little more beyond just regular work and team building. And I know then some other friends who have more of those flexible arrangements say that their teams will have a shared calendar and they will update it so they can all kind of plan on, hey, I see a lot of people are coming into the office on Thursday, I guess I'll come in and join them too. We can all get lunch. It just kind of helps nudge people along. Another way you can use something of that calendar is having leaders communicate that a day of the week that they plan to be in the office, and having managers and leaders really be your role model for the behavior that's desired.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That's really great to hear. And it looks like we're running a little bit close to time. We want to be mindful of everyone, especially for those waiting to get the SHRM PDC. So we're going to answer two more. One just came in from Renee. She's asking about, as a rapidly growing company, they're building on an onboarding program. And what would be the top 3 things you would recommend to include to assist in driving motivation as those new hires are starting at the company? So one thing that I really like to focus on, and at Blueboard, we're actually revisiting our own onboarding strategy right now to make sure that we're ready for some rapid growth that's coming up on our side as well, is really to connect people to the mission, vision, and values as early as possible. I saw a really great presentation in Denver a few weeks ago from Beck Chi, who's the VP of Global Talent at Atlassian, which is another San Francisco-based company. They have this great kit that they share with people ahead of joining that includes really fun interactive items. Like, I believe they do a viewfinder, if you guys remember those from back in the day growing up in childhood, that you can view and play around with, that actually presents their mission, vision, and values in a really fun way. But they actually time a few different items that would link to motivators, like an employee welcome gift, for example, or the viewfinder with the mission, vision, and values. Or things to keep organized and focus on autonomy, like issuing a shared Trello board ahead of the employee even arriving at the company. So that gives them time to really digest some of those key items before they even start, so that when they do arrive at the company, they're not overwhelmed with everything that's being thrown at them. So those were things that I thought were really interesting. But to summarize again, really focusing on the mission, vision, and values very specifically. And at Blueboard, we still have our co-founders take time to present that section for every new hire batch that comes through, so that they see that we do really value our mission and values and keep those a priority, so much that our co-founders take time out of their busy day to walk through that one-on-one with all of the new hires. But I'm happy to let our panelists add anything else that they do at their companies that's interesting for onboarding.
Yeah, I will say a little bit about what we do at SIFT. We have a pretty robust onboarding program because we really are thoughtful about bringing on our employees. It makes such a difference. And so a couple of the things that we do is on day one, there's the typical benefits and technology, getting them set up, but we spend about 45 minutes talking about people and culture and doing an orientation focused just on that, covering our values and the company goals, and again, these things around their development and expectations that they can have at SIFT. And then, similar to one of the points you made, Morgan, our CEO still does then a SIFT 101 and talks about the journey of SIFT, and gives them an opportunity to really see and hear from our top leader about their work in this company. And we do that through some other what we call like SIFT EDUs and lunch and learns with other leaders at the business too.
Awesome. Great. And we're going to do one last question and then we'll move on to close up. So the last one came from Philippe, who was talking about more lateral motivation. So I see this a lot, even in my own personal role at Blueboard, but knowing that you might be working cross-functionally with people who are your peers, also things like managers who might be the same level of you, how can you inspire motivation across your peers at an organization, or even have those managers look up to you? And something that I find really valuable just in my own role as a manager at Blueboard is really just showing that you are accountable, showing that you drive results, and really leading with action versus words, so that people might want to follow your lead. And we talked at the very beginning about how motivation can be contagious. And as you kind of establish your own baselines for performance and really focusing on what's most important to you and your goals, others will emulate that and see that you are someone who's a contributor and they can trust with regards to getting things done in the organization. So that's just my personal experience with it, but I'm happy to open it up to the panelists for any final thoughts.
Yeah, just a real quick thing to add. I know as our company has grown and scaled, one thing that's been really effective and helpful is our COO started this kind of weekly meeting for team leads. and we're all responsible for sharing kind of our team's data the night before. Everyone's kind of expected to attend the meeting the next day with any kind of outstanding questions about the data. And then we really do sit down and kind of have an agenda with really kind of clear action items and kind of hot topics in the company. I've seen that be like a really effective way to kind of think as the team leads as a kind of cohesive team. So I've definitely seen some success there.